Well, how you doing? Great to have you with us. IB Nation Sports Talk off and rolling. Shout out to all of our loyal regular listeners and welcome to all our new listeners as well. I've noticed the last couple of days some new handles in the old YouTube chat. So glad to have you with us. And, we're all gearing up for training camp right now because it's August 2nd. And that means we're just 3 days away from the start of Notre Dame's fall training camp. And I'm Sean Stiers, along with Jesse Stiers today. I didn't realize there was a cold front in Cleveland. I just noticed the hooded sweatshirt that you're wearing there.
I sit right by the air conditioner, so I get a little bit chilly during the day.
Gotcha. So how are you doing today? Your face looks a little red.
Thanks. No, I'm doing good. I don't know why my face is red, but I'm doing good. Work went well today. Now it's on to the fun stuff. Like you mentioned, it's the beginning of August, and the beginning of August is just like the start for any type of football camp. High school football is going, NFL training camp is basically going full pads this week. We got college camps starting up, first practice this Friday. So a lot of excitement. This is probably my favorite time of the year. August rolling into September into August. I love the fall season. I love when football is back. So I'm on the edge of my seat. I can't wait.
We've got the NFL Network on all day, watching the training camp updates and the training
I do.
camp
I
interviews.
Actually, that's my favorite thing to do while
That's
I
what
work.
I'm doing.
And from about like 9 to midnight, I'll just pop it on, hope the Cowboys roll through. But it's still, I play a lot of fantasy football, so it's good to see all of these like insights into camp and, like what's going on, what the breakdown is, who's going to be the star wide receivers this year, all that good stuff.
One of the perks of working from home is being able to have NFL Network or whatever you want on in the background, sometime a baseball game or whatever it happens to be. Garen Knudsen doing the job for us today. IB Nation Sports Talk. Hit that like button. That's right. We don't even have to tell Garen. Hit the like button, rate us, subscribe, comment, all that good stuff. We appreciate it. It helps us out. We're ready to get rolling here today. A lot to talk about because we do have training camp in 3 days. You've been, as a college player, you've been through a few training camps yourself. What's that feeling like when camp, it's coming up? It's only a couple days away.
Well, it's all fun and games until you start working into like 2 practices a day, and then you got film sessions between each practice as well. So it's all fun until like that. You're like midweek. You got your first padded, full padded practice after a morning practice, and you can't wait to go slugging a couple other guys. But it is fun. The excitement is there. It's good to be back around with all of your brothers. It's fun to be. It's kind of secluded because no one else is really on campus, and the people who are on campus it's all athletes. So that's everyone always asks me, why do the Cowboys go here for training camp? Why do teams leave to go to training camp? Well, the simple answer is you block out all distractions. You provide no other extracurricular activities, and you focus on football for predominantly a month. You breathe, you sleep, and you eat football for the next month, and it's a lot of fun. Minus, like I said, the hot weather, the 2 practices a day, all that fun stuff. And I'm sure these guys are all thinking about, the games that are coming up. That's what drives you through all of it, the games that are coming up. Honestly, too, fighting for a position. And that's going to be something I think we'll see a lot of in this Notre Dame camp is a lot of guys jockeying for starter positions, second string positions, third string positions.
Right.
And even if you're not a starter, you're trying to work your way into a lot of the special teams units. So it's a lot's going on. There's a lot of competition. It's a lot of fun. But more than anything, guys are going to be looking forward to, that first game against Ohio State. It's going to become more and more eagerness.
Absolutely. Well, we've got a lot of questions that we're going to get to today. If you're watching live in the YouTube right now, you can obviously shoot us your own questions. As always, we've already got a super chat that we're going to get to here in just a moment. It ties into one of the questions that we were going to ask anyway. We actually have a rapid fire question coming up later that came from yesterday's chat that we didn't get to on yesterday's show. So, Jesse, you're not a Better Call Saul watcher, right? I still haven't, been able to talk you into that.
It's a lot. You watch a lot of shows. It's hard to keep.
Like you don't. You just don't watch the same ones.
Yeah, but you're like TV pop culture. If there's a TV show out there that's any good, chances are you've probably watched it.
Which is why you should be watching it. It's like you should take a cue and go. And because series is winding down. Final 2 episodes after last night's show, and you watch a show like Better Call Saul, and everyone's got questions, I guess, is my point. What's going to happen to this guy? Why did she do that? I'm not going to, give away any Saul spoilers, but, in this case, what's going to happen to Jimmy? Maybe the biggest question with a couple episodes to go, that's, kind of been on a slow burn. What's happens to Kim, and again, I'm not going to give anything away that I've seen so far. Questions. Like you watched Lost, so you know what I'm talking about. There's a lot of questions that come up within the show. There's always these little riddles and cliffhangers and all that kind of stuff. And, so there are just a lot of questions to be answered. And it's no different now for Marcus Freeman heading into his training camp. There are questions that need to be answered just like there always are at the start of a training camp. They're, different, but in some ways the same this year. We're going to start with some of our own fall training camp questions that we have. And again, I'll get to that super chat here that's pertaining to the quarterbacks with our second question. It'll tie into that. So we'll kind of go back and forth. We each kind of came up with some questions. Jess, I'll let you start us off. What's your first question? These aren't maybe necessarily in order of priority, but in some sense they might be. What's your first question that you have as far as training camp week that's to be in?
The first thing that came to mind to me is how is the defensive line going to look and perform with the new defensive line coach? Notre Dame has produced many NFL interior and exterior defensive ends in the past. And just to name a few, there's Jerry Tillery, Jameer Jones, Kurt Heinisch, Julian Okwara, Romeo Okwara, Isaac Rochelle, Khalid Kareem, Dalen Hayes. There's still a few more in there, but the main dominance on the Notre Dame defensive side of the ball has been their defensive line. And when you lose a good defensive line coach, how is that unit going to look and going to perform going into the season this year?
Yeah, and I think when you look at just what you're talking about, the way Mike Elston has coached these guys, the fortunate part is you've got a lot of high-end talent that's going to be on that defensive line. Like when you look at, like when you go across from strong end, to the Viper defensive end, you potentially got Riley Mills at the strong end, Howard Cross in the middle, Jason Adamalola, and then Isaiah Foskey. In the second unit, potentially Nana Osafo-Mensah, Jacob Lacey, Chris Smith, the transfer from Harvard, the grad transfer who came in, and then Justin Adamalola behind Foskey as well. So you've got, especially on that, call it right side, like as we draw up the depth chart and stuff like that, the Foskey, Adamalola, and, Smith and Justin Adamalola side. There's a ton of talent and experience over there. Howard Cross and Jacob Lacey each give you some experience kind of anchoring one of those defensive tackle spots. Tons of upside still with Riley Mills. This is still, a big prove-it year, though, I think, for him. And then, that battle with Osafo-Mensah behind him as well. But, the point is, Notre Dame's defensive lines were always great under Mike Elston. They moved him to linebacker coach, remember, for when Brian Van Gorder was there for a couple of years. That's when the defensive lines had their issues. When he was not the defensive line coach, then they move him back to defensive line coach, and they're cranking out all these NFL guys like you're talking about once again. And there is at least a question. Al Washington's been a great recruiter, and we've seen a lot of good things from him so far. But, most of his coaching, and especially his most recent coaching experience, has been coaching another position. It's been coaching linebackers. He played defensive line in college, but he hasn't coached it as much, especially recently. So, I think there is some question there. The fortunate part is you've got guys like Foskey and the Adamalola twins, who bring you a lot of skill and experience, who you're pretty confident in. But again, it's a bit of an unknown. We didn't see anything during the spring that would say, man, there's going to be a drop off. But again, you've got all these experienced guys coming back. So I think, it's a question, but the upside is they do have so much returning experience that you would hope that the transition would not be, really noticeable, at least in the short term right now.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing I look at on the defensive line unit, I look at it quite honestly, kind of like a hockey rotation shift, and especially with now how college football is played. Your second unit has to be pretty similar in strength to your first unit because you're rotating guys in and out a lot. You have to have.
That's what's made them so good is the fact that they do have those rotations.
Yeah, exactly. So I think my biggest concern is I know the first unit is going to be good, but what kind of drop off is there potentially going to be between the first and second unit? Just because, like I was saying, there's going to be what I would call line changes, depending on scheme, giving guys a breather, that kind of thing. So my biggest question is, can they keep up the consistent, performance, and will we see any drop off between the first and second string units? Because I think if that second string unit can be just as strong as the first string unit, we'll come back to this question probably 10 weeks from now and be like, wow, why were we even concerned about this? Right. But it's still a concern right now. With the standard that has been set, you almost have to, that you would like that standard to be met or if not exceeded. So that's just, I think, one of the big things I'm looking forward to defensively, and especially with a secondary that's going to have some troubles. You want a good defensive line that's going to get after the quarterback and provide less coverage time for your secondary.
Yep, I agree. And Tyler agrees with you as well about the points that you make. And, I think they're all very fair and very valid. For them to be successful, that second unit has to be, at least in the ballpark of what that first unit is. Not too many guys are going to be in the ballpark of what Isaiah Foskey's going to give you, or even Jason Adamalola at some points. But, it's a nice luxury to have a grad transfer like Chris Brown right behind him as well. But, look, last year we saw Cade Madden come in, and he had all this hype. It was the offensive line, obviously, but he had all this hype and all this experience coming in from Marshall, smaller school, all this different stuff. But he didn't have a good offensive line coach. And again, it's too soon for me. I'm not saying that I'm doubting Al Washington by any means. Again, I love his recruiting and everything that he's done there. But there's a difference between recruiting and coaching the technical aspects of being a great defensive lineman. And Mike Elston was great at coaching these guys into being great. Many of them obviously being, diamond in the rough, 3-star type guys that he was able to, to turn into NFL draft picks himself. So, I think it is a valid question, and it's something that, we'll kind of see. Only time will tell kind of thing. Again, I didn't see anything that was concerning in the spring, but it's basically it's on situation now because we're 32 days away from Ohio State. So it can look a lot different, with a little bit of pressure on you. All right, so I do want to address real quick, the stuff going on in the chat right now. Everyone's asking about Keon Keeley. We don't have any definitive answers here. Everything that we're hearing, though, still points to Keon Keeley being at Notre Dame. I'm not the recruiting guy. Jesse's not the recruiting guy. Ryan is. Brian, obviously is very involved in recruiting as well. And just talking with them and hearing some of their stuff. I'm still confident in Keeley being here. He is obviously a big part of this 2023 class. But, that's all that I can give you on that right now. Brian and Ryan and all those guys obviously are talking recruiting all the time. So, between going to the boards and listening to their shows, they'll be able to give you more on that. But everything I'm hearing right now still says, I saw this one from Tyler, relax. That's all you can do right now. And Frankie say it too. So Frankie Saberlax, and so did Aaron Rodgers. So we'll see. Again, we'll see. But as of right now, I'm not. I don't think there's any reason to panic at all in terms of Keon Keeley. Okay, so my top camp question: how soon will a starting quarterback be named? Because this is at least in name a quarterback competition. It was a competition between the two in the spring, Tyler Buckner and Drew Pine, and everything that we saw said that Tyler Buckner was the guy. They've both been putting in the work over the summer, which is exactly what you would expect. But like last year, they didn't wait very long. It was like by the end of the first week, Jack Cohn ended up being named the starting quarterback when he was battling for the job with Drew Pine. I think in that case, you obviously had a quarterback with more experience coming in from Wisconsin. You brought him in because of his experience, and so they named a starter relatively quickly. How important, Jess, do you think it is to do this sooner than later?
In my opinion, as long as they have a starting quarterback named by the end of camp and you're starting to go into your preparation for Ohio State, I think that's the perfect timeline to have a starting quarterback named. And I think it's important to do so, or at least to have some competition during camp, because guys respond to that competition. The quarterbacks are going to be playing at an elevated / kind of, pressure type mentality because they know that they are fighting for a starting position. And I think that is something that's important when it comes to camp, and the other players around them know, what's going on. The running backs know it. The offensive line knows it. The wide receivers know it. So they want to put forth their best effort too. I don't think that there's any need to name a starting quarterback like right now. Like I said, I think as long as you are naming it by the end of camp, I think that there is no issues with that. I just think, kind of going back to what, hammering home on this point, is I think that when you have a competition like this, or you don't name a starter for the first couple of weeks, it provides such good competition throughout camp. Both guys will be playing at their highest level. They'll want to bring it every day. And I think that's important when you're going through camp because it sets the tone for everyone else.
Yeah, and I mean, like when you look at these two quarterbacks, there is a difference in the skill sets. Obviously, Buckner is a much better runner, and he brings a different dimension to the game than Drew Pine can bring. So, I feel like if it's obvious that Buckner is the guy, then you name him, like you don't have to wait. I think that's what Brian Kelly and Tommy Rees kind of went with last year, that they felt like it was obvious Jack Cohn was the guy and they named him the starter early. You get it out of the way, and you kind of let Jack Cohn move into that leadership role. That would be, from a Buckner standpoint, a young guy. I would think that would be something that could be valuable for him. Is again, like if it's a true competition and you don't feel like he is clearly the guy, then you let the competition go on a little bit longer and see if Pine, overtakes him, or if one of them pulls ahead, I guess. But again, if it's fairly clear that Buckner's the guy, I think that from the leadership thing, from the let's get into what this offense is going to be with Tyler Buckner and that kind of stuff, there would be some benefit to it, to doing it sooner than later. Wicked Bronco Productions has a super chat for us. Hey guys, love the show. Thank you. With Buckner being the favorite to be the starter week 1, what chances do you think that will make Pine transfer? And he also asked any update on Keon Keeley. We already did the Keeley up. What we can give right now. As far as the Pine transfer thing, I don't think so. I especially like where he is right now. There would not be any benefit to him, packing up and leaving. I think he showed, like, there was that question again popped up last year. Now you're a year older and all that stuff this year, but like when you look at Drew Pine and some of the stuff that his dad has even said as well, I think that they're pretty deep with Notre Dame. That Notre Dame means a lot to him. So I don't see that happening. I don't see Drew Pine, if Tyler Buckner is the starter, I don't see Drew Pine packing up and leaving. So I don't feel like that is a legitimate concern right now.
Yeah, going on what you're saying there a little bit, I think Drew Pine kind of yes, everyone wants to be the starter, but at the same time, him being able to be a backup quarterback at the University of Notre Dame and still finish out his degree, I think hold higher precedence to someone like himself. Could he transfer and potentially play at a smaller school? Yes, but then he sacrifices, the degree and education that he gets at the University of Notre Dame. And I think he's one of those guys who has some, good head on their shoulders, knowing that his chances at the NFL are probably pretty slim. He could probably make that statement himself. And so when you leave and you're all of a sudden it's done, I think he has a better opportunity at staying, getting his education done, rather than maybe, transferring to a smaller school where he might get to be a starter for a year, maybe 2 years.
Right. Maybe that happens after the season, something like I don't think we can ever fully read into what's going through these guys' heads, but I think that as of right now, just what you were talking about, the importance of getting the degree and all that stuff, that is still very high on Drew Pine's priority list. So I don't think it's a concern right now. All right, as we continue our fall camp questions, Jess, what do you have next?
The next pressing question that I had is, what can we expect out of the defensive unit, knowing that the secondary may be the blemish or the issue this season? Will they be blitz heavy like last year in order to aid the secondary? We kind of talked about this a little bit ago. The sooner you can get pressure on the quarterback, obviously the less time you have to spend in coverage. And can they afford to blitz as much without Kyle Hamilton? Who's going to be the ball hawk? Who's going to be the security blanket in the secondary to cover the deep third or the deep half if you're going to be blitzing like that?
Yeah, and I mean, I think, first of all, again, we spent a lot of time talking about the defensive line just a second ago. You look at Isaiah Foskey with 11 sacks, and then the two Adam Alolas combined for 8.5 last year. So that's 19.5 sacks, almost 20 between those three guys combined. So obviously, you get a lot of pressure up front without blitzing. They did do a lot of blitzing last year. That did lead to some of those bigger plays and stuff like that. Brandon Joseph is he's basically the heir apparent. You're bringing in another All-American. You trade one All-American and Kyle Hamilton for Brandon Joseph. I feel like, he's definitely going to be that guy at the back end. But you also, in terms of your pass rush, you've got guys like Jordan Botelho, could be a big, X factor in pass rush type situations, third downs and that kind of thing, where you just let him, you get an extra body on the field and you let a guy like him pin his ears back. And I don't know. You're the guy who played defense in college, and you've had different defensive coordinators, going back to high school and through, like with different philosophies on blitzing. I feel like you can still selectively blitz. I'll be curious to see with Al Golden being a defensive coordinator for the first time, in several years now, going all the way back to his time as an assistant coach at Virginia, before he moved on to become a head coach, at Temple and Miami, and then his time in the NFL where he, wasn't necessarily a coordinator, but he was a position coach. I'll be curious to see sort of what his philosophy is along those lines with blitzing. I think you can obviously still selectively blitz, but I will be curious to see if they're necessarily as aggressive as Marcus Freeman was with, in his time as, his short time, 1 year as defensive coordinator for the Irish.
Yeah, I think that you could probably see somewhere right in the middle. I don't think that they'll go to the extreme of kind of what Marcus Freeman's defense looked like last year with a lot of blitzing. You saw a lot of zone blitzing, stuff like that. I just think with kind of where they are at as a whole unit on defensively, I don't think that they should play maybe as aggressive. I still think, yes, there's obviously always going to be blitz packages built in and there's going to be blitz calls. I'd like to see it somewhere in the middle, kind of your baseline being, towards the bottom and Marcus Freeman kind of being the extreme of defensive styles. It would be nice to be somewhere in the middle, knowing, what kind of defensive secondary they have. You got to create pressure, but at the same time, you can't put your secondary in a bind to give up the big play. So, if it were me, I would like to see a lot of, kind of stunts that incorporate your linebackers and defensive linemen kind of twisting in and out, shooting different gaps, getting the offensive linemen to have to think a little bit. And even if you're not bringing, 6, you can still bring 5 and still, put basically create an extra pressure with a fifth man is what I would like to see.
Yeah, and because of the combinations that they're going to have with potentially Bertrand and Leofau playing next to each other, I think there's going to be a big upgrade in overall speed and athleticism especially at the inside linebacker positions this year with those two guys playing next to each other. You're going to be able to do different stuff there, and obviously you still have Bo Bauer in the mix when it comes to, like he's been, kind of, the dime guy in the past as he get himself, more reps and that kind of stuff. So, and then, you've got Kaiser and again, you've got Botello as an option there as well. So I think that there are a lot of different options and things they can do where they don't necessarily have to sell out maybe quite as much, where they can still get a lot of pressure on the quarterback with what they've got. I think, most of the time they're going to be, that defensive front is going to be clearly better than the offensive line they're playing across from. And, so I think that that's going to benefit them with the kind of pressure that they can get, with that front seven without having to, again, kind of sell out blitz type thing.
Yeah, and I think another thing that I would like to see is just strategically blitzing. Don't just call a blitz to call a blitz. I think they're going to have to be very selective of when they strategically kind of want to call things, and so they can catch teams off guard. I think that's what they really have to be focused on this year, is not blitzing at the same frequency, and when they do blitz, it needs to be strategically timed. Kind of like a chess match, not playing checkers is how I would describe it.
Wicked Bronco Productions asks, is there a reason Jalen Sneed, a 5-star, is not getting a starting job? Well, one, regardless of your stars, you still got to earn the job. So, I think
still got to show up to camp and perform well.
That's right. Got
to show that you know what's going on.
And there's Brian Driscoll. There's Brian Driscoll, basically echoing the same thing. Starting positions aren't handed out to the highest ranked players. Yes, that's exactly right. Regardless of what your star ranking is and all that, you still have to earn the job. And in Jalen Sneed's case, at least for right now, he's got Jack Kaiser in front of him, over there at that rover position. And Jack Kaiser is pretty good at it, and he's got a lot of experience now. He's a senior. He's been around for a while. That doesn't mean Jalen Sneed, might not work himself into some reps here or there. But again, that's something, and a guy to kind of keep an eye out for during camp as well, is exactly, because there's a lot of talented youth on this defense, and we're going to continue to see, more talent coming in over the next few years, the way Marcus Freeman is recruiting. And, again, I know everyone's freaking out about Keeley right now, and maybe Brian Driscoll can, since he's in the chat right now, he could chime in, or even if he wants to come in for a second and talk about Keon Keeley, since that was a hot topic here just a second ago before he got in, we could address that. But, I think that just what we were saying earlier, maybe just relax a little bit is the way to go on that. But I agree with what you're saying, Jess. I think that there are still places they can do it. Because again, you've got Brandon Joseph at the back, you've got Ramon Henderson at the boundary safety. There will be questions in coverage, that's for sure. But I feel like they can get pressure with that front where they don't necessarily have to go all out with that.
Yeah, and it's interesting. The more you get into the guts of being a defensive coordinator, you have specific down and distances where you like certain blitzes. You know what I mean? You're going to, on 3rd and 3, that you have probably 3 to 4 different blitz schemes, depending on formation, that you would feel comfortable, running with. So it's going to be interesting to see. They have the athletes. That's the fun part, is they have the athletes to kind of mix and match and come up with different schemes. And I think that's what I'm trying to hit on the most, is I would like to see them, really use kind of these pieces to their advantage, really draw up and schematically come up with blitzes that really fits, their personnel and where it fits in during the game as well, strategically calling those blitzes as well. But I still would love to see kind of that aggressive mentality. I like that on defense. I like going to get the ball. I like applying the pressure rather than, waiting for the pressure to be applied to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Zachary says, need the experience going into Columbus. These young guys will be stars someday, but they still need to learn the different from high school ball and the competition they'll be seeing game one. That is for sure. And, again, like you got Prince Khali out there, and, how much do we maybe see about him, this season? Again, he's someone that I think that a lot of people that were more anxious to see last year. And we did get to see him a little bit, and maybe we get to see more of him this year. But I'm excited about this linebacking group. I'm excited about the front seven. The secondary is definitely the biggest question that they've got defensively, and it's more one position than anything else. But again, we'll see how that plays out. We talked about that a little bit more on yesterday's show, so you can always go back and listen to that as well. My next question: how close to 100% is Jarrett Patterson, and will he be a full go at the start of camp after his torn pectoral muscle at the beginning of March? And he's someone obviously that is, he's the most experienced and the best overall lineman, and potentially switching positions, moving off center after extensive time there. Zeke Correll, who started 6 games at left guard last season and then was overtaken, by Andrew Kristofic, who started the last 7 games of the season. So it's like that pectoral muscle, it's been 5 months now, but not really a lot of information on exactly where Jarrett Patterson is. But, if you're talking about getting your 5 best guys on the line, I think having Jarrett Patterson and Zeke Correll out there is very important. But, again, like, where is Correll in his recovery? Because, 5 months sounds like a lot of time, but, you're going to lose, and again, like you're someone, who spent a lot of time in the weight room in your life. You're going to lose a lot of strength, especially with a tear there. And that's the big thing is building that strength back up, in that pec. And I would think that also has to even affect, like, being able to do some of the lower body work, squats and, some of the deadlifts and stuff that they do. When you've got a torn pec, it's going to limit a lot of the things that you can do. So exactly where he is coming into camp, I think is going to be, a pretty important question for this offensive line.
Yeah, it's funny. You don't realize how important, your knee, your pec, your ankle is until you hurt it. You realize every day-to-day motion that kind of relies on whatever you hurt. And being an offensive lineman with a pectoral injury, that's where majority of their power is coming from. Your first 2 movements as an offensive lineman is your kick back and your punch, your initial punch
right here. Yeah.
And so all of that power is coming literally from your pectoral area. That's why, bench press and those kind of movements are so important, especially for offensive linemen, is getting that first punch out there. So a pectoral injury for offensive linemen, any athlete in the football realms is highly important. But, with the injury coming in March and it being fully torn, a usual kind of recovery for that is 3 to 4 months. We're kind of in that window right now. But when we're talking about someone like Jarrett Patterson, who's, the expectations is kind of being one of the leaders of this offensive unit, I would be more inclined to ease him into it as they're going through camp, kind of see, where his baseline is at now that it's been almost 5 months. I don't think there should be any rush to necessarily get him out there as soon as possible. I think having him for Ohio State would be highly important. But if he's not ready, he's not ready. You have the entire season. That's more important than Ohio State. But I think, it would be nice to see him out on the practice field during camp, even if he's not, going through full reps, getting a lot of those reps in there. I don't think he has to go Russell Wilson style where he's out on the field, going through all these dry air and walkthroughs before games and practices and stuff like that. But it would be important to see him going out there and going through, at least some of the rhythm of the reps, the mentality of the reps, and that kind of stuff. And then obviously getting him out there and gearing him up to go 100% because, as an offensive line, you have to work together as a whole unit. So when your whole leader is out, I think that's very critical. But, being Jarrett Patterson, I think he wants to get out there as soon as possible. So the sooner that he can get out there and that offensive line can kind of get orchestrated together, the better. But like I said, there's no rush to get him out there and get him into stuff if he's not ready for it yet.
Yeah, one, it's a nice security blanket to have Andrew Kristofic. If Patterson is going to need more time, you've got, Patterson being out is what led to Zeke Correll getting all the reps at center and them finding out how good he can be at center and saying, man, he's good enough that we can move Patterson over to guard, and that potentially bumps Kristofic. He kind of becomes the odd man out. But, again, if Patterson is not able to go early on, you have the luxury that you do have Kristofic and all that experience, and as well as he played in those last 7 games last year. So that's kind of a nice little security blanket to have. That's the first thought. 2, I don't know why you're always so down on Russell Wilson. I just, it's like
Broncos country. Let's ride.
Well, there is that. It's like, but
he's
do
just
you
a
think
corny
that Jared
guy.
Patterson is going to do a Russell Wilson and wear his own jersey, into,
okay, you're going against yourself here. Why Russell Wilson is so insufferable sometimes.
That's right.
Shows up to a team he's never played before wearing his own jersey into training camp. Like, come on,
guys, I'm going to wear my own jersey.
No, I don't think Jared Patterson will go to that extreme, but it'd be nice to see him doing those sort of things, just staying engaged, even if he's not physically going through, the rep 100%.
Right. All right. So I think, where are we? Okay. So that was my question. So you've got another one coming up. You've got another camp question.
Yeah, I think this is the one of the bigger offensive questions that I came up with, and it boils down to is how will Michael Mayer be utilized? Will he be the main target that Buckner is looking for? Will a lot of the plays be designed to go to Michael Mayer, or will they use him as a decoy for other wide receivers to get favorable, one-on-one matchups going forward?
Yeah, and I mean, he was essentially one of their most consistent, stretch the field threats last year. Kevin Austin factored in there as well. But when you look at his production, what he gave them last year, 71 catches for 840 yards. In terms of the top returning receivers, Avery Davis, Braden Lindsey, Lorenzo Styles, those 3 guys have just a little bit more, overall yards. And, what about 200 more yards and just a couple more receptions overall, basically, than what Michael Mayer had himself, and this kind of piggybacks into, mine as well. Like, who's going to be, in terms of the wide receivers, who are the go-to guys going to be? We know who they should be, in the case of Lorenzo Styles, we kind of saw his coming out party, but now is he going to be consistent with that? Is he really going to be the guy? Because this is obviously a big question, a big position of question that they have. How exactly is this going to work? What's this, how's this offense going to operate with an All-American tight end? I do think Styles is fully capable of being that. But again, we've really only seen it in one game. Most of the production that he had last year, 24 catches and over 344 yards, most of it came in the Fiesta Bowl. So got to show that he can do it consistently. And this is again, going back to the situation with the running backs, when you only have the 3 healthy scholarship running backs coming into training camp, it also, I think, affects, we saw what Chris Tyree can be as a receiver, and Kyron Williams was their number 4 target last year out of the backfield. He had almost 360 yards and 42 catches, and you could easily see Chris Tyree at least being in that kind of production area after he had 24 catches of his own last year. But how much can you afford to, to go with 21 personnel when, you've only got 3, again, healthy scholarship running backs, so it's like it's really intriguing to me to see what Tommy Rees is going to put together and how this, offense is going to operate, and, who are going to be the receivers who are going to step up for this crew. Cause you've got some experience, but you've got guys who still haven't shown that they can do it. And you're relatively thinning some spots as well. And like we talked about Tobias Merriweather yesterday, it's a really great opportunity for a freshman like over at that W receiver where he's got Deion Colsey and Joe Wilkins in front of him. Again, like he was one of the players to watch, I think, for me anyway, coming into this fall camp because of that, because of the opportunities that he could potentially have if he can show what he can do.
Yeah, I think ideally, this in my perfect offensive schematic, what I would like to see is obviously, Michael Mayer is going to be Michael Mayer. He's the top tight end in the country. I don't care what any other award says. Michael Mayer will be the first tight end drafted, whatever draft class that he's in. He's a stud. He's the best tight end in the country. That's already accounted for. He's going to, short down situations. He's got to be the guy you're looking for. 3rd and 3, 3rd and 4. But when he draws coverage, and especially if it's double team, you got to have guys like Braden Lindsey, Avery Davis, and especially I think the X factor is Lorenzo Styles. Lorenzo Styles needs to play like a Chase Claypool, a Miles Boykin, a Michael Floyd of the past. He's got a Dez Bryant is another great comparison with his body frame. He's got to be the big body to go up and high point the ball. He's got to be the guy to, you can throw a long bomb to after, dumping down to Michael Mayer in the flats, or, maybe Avery Davis or Braden Lindsey on, those kind of short, quicker routes to really exploit their speed. And another thing that I like that you brought up is if they go 21 personnel, motioning out one of those wide receivers into the slot and letting him go to work one-on-one with a linebacker. I think that's a very favorable matchup that the running backs could get into. And that also provides, coverage problems when you have a running back in the slot, you have, Braden or Avery out there, and you got Lorenzo Styles and you got Michael Mayer. I think it could create a lot of matchup nightmares. It's just a matter of these guys got to step up. It's time. I know Lorenzo Styles is a sophomore, but this has to be his coming out party this year. He has to play as a big framed, big bodied wide receiver who's going to get you those big catches when you need. And guys like Braden Lindsey and Avery Davis, like, what are you guys waiting for? This is your time. Like, we've heard about this speed and athleticism that they've had, but it's never been on display, in my opinion. It's never been fully utilized. So I think if those guys can come into harmony with, like I said, Michael Mayer, Lorenzo Styles, good running backs out of the backfield, Avery Davis, potentially Joe Wilkins, Braden Lindsey, they have the pieces to be a good, wide receiver corps. It's just a matter of how they put it together, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. There's talent there. It is just untapped talent, for the most part. And, again, like Avery Davis is coming back from injury. And if he didn't have that injury, he wouldn't be coming back for his 6th year. Braden Lindsey, injury riddled a couple of years ago, was more healthy last year. But, like you said, we didn't really see anything like what would that have been 3 years ago, I guess, at this point, when we did see, what he could do as a runner and a pass catcher. But we did have another question regarding the running backs from Milton Fan 15 between Estime and Diggs. Who's the number 2? My thought, Estime is going to be a beast if given the opportunity. Well, Diggs is still hurt right now. There's all. Have you seen all these videos of Diggs? With the agility drills and all this stuff that he's been doing.
Lean, looking fast.
Quick feet, very fast feet. The issue is obviously still his shoulder, because he's about 4 months out from having the labrum surgery. So like all the agility and the speed and all that stuff is looking great right now. But, how soon he is cleared for contact and those kind of things is, that's going to be the question. Marcus Freeman, saying maybe there's a chance that, he is ready for Ohio State. That would be a big bonus for sure. But, right now, I think that Estime is the clear number 2. It's the depth chart is pretty simple. It's Chris Tyree, it's the big guy, Audric Estime, and then it's Jabron Payne, true freshman. And Payne will have an opportunity, obviously, to show what he can do. I said this yesterday with Estime. I'd just like to see a little bit less lateral movement, for a big guy like him. Get that ball, hit the hole a little bit quicker. I think he's going to have, better holes to run through this year with this offensive line. But he's got pretty soft hands too, so he can catch the ball. All these guys can catch the ball. So, I think that there are some different things that they can do. They're just going to be thin on numbers for right now. Key is, once they get Diggs back, assuming, they don't sustain, any other injuries. And, that's the biggest thing when you're down to 3 on the depth chart, 3 scholarship running backs is you're one injury away from being even more depleted. So, knock on wood, hopefully it doesn't come to that. But, I think we're going to see some good things from all of these guys this year because they're going to have to, all perform in different situations this season because of the numbers that they have.
Yeah, I mean, if Diggs can get healthy, I really, really, really like their running back depth. I already like it, right now, but like you said, it's hard because they are an injury away. So if they can get Diggs back, I think they have a really good running back rotation. And it's funny, every time you say the name Chris Tyree, all I can think of is Gus Johnson going crazy on that kickoff return against Wisconsin. That's like instantly what my mind clicks to anytime I hear the word Tyree.
That's right. That's right. I had forgotten about that till you said that. And that was probably like the last, until the Fiesta Bowl, that was probably the last big highlight that he had, because of his own injuries and stuff like that. So, but I mean, he's talented for sure. And
he's got the speed.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Someone who can do it. And again, he's going to have a better offensive line in front of him this year. So that's going to help. All right. It's rapid fire time. Are you ready?
I am ready. I think this is my favorite part of the show. I never know what's coming, so I'm ready for it. The best
Vince
I can
said
be.
That last night too, and I think it's because you guys mostly did rapid fire with me on my old show before we did this, so you're all used to doing rapid fire.
Oh, we're primed and ready.
That's right. That's right. Okay. Do you buy or sell that Notre Dame should be considered a legit national title contender going into this season?
This is tough. I'm on the fence. National contender, national championship contender with a new starting quarterback, a big kind of changeover within the coaching staff, a first-time head coach, some question marks in the secondary. I don't think that I would put them as a national title contender. Will they contend? Probably towards the end of the season and the expectations be 10-2, potentially 11-1. Yes, but I don't think they're going to go undefeated. And I think in order for them to be national championship contenders, they got to go undefeated or 11-1. And I just don't quite see them there yet. I know that might, discourage or not be what a lot of fans want to hear, but I think a solid 10-2 season this year, anything better than, 8-4, 9-3, I think is a really good year for them. I think they have, getting Buckner the experience that he needs. How much can he develop from game one to the end of the season? That's something big that will have to be seen. But I just don't think I'm ready to put them national title contenders with the kind of questions that they have right now.
How about this? They are a national title contender at least for another 32 days. Ask me September 4th.
Let's see.
I mean, that's kind of what this is shaping up to be. When you're starting the season at Ohio State, with all these factors that we've talked about, a first-time starting quarterback and a first-time head coach and all this stuff, going back to his alma mater.
Offensive power. They're going to they have one of the best offenses in the country.
That's right. I think that they can at least be in the conversation through that game. It's a matter of how do they come out of that game? Or, if they win that game, they are automatically one of probably, 5 or 6 who you're going to put, boom, squarely in that conversation. If they lose a close game, then they can still be in that conversation because it's a road game, because it's a first-time head coach, because it's a first-time, quarterback, all these different things. If so I'm not sitting here saying, well, take solace, if they lose a close game and that kind of stuff. But if you look at the big picture, if they at least play a close game on the road in that environment, night game and the whole thing, then I think, they have every right to think that they're still a title contender. Now, obviously,
100%.
Blowout loss is going to be another question, but, and I'm not saying that's going to happen, but that's just what it is. It's going to be really hard. It would be really hard for them to overcome, a lopsided loss, in the season opener against Ohio State for them to have any case to say they're a national title contender, unless they come out of that game and just steamroll everybody else, including, Clemson and USC then at the end of the season. But I think for right now, look at last year as an example with all the talk about, transition year. And, I think I was squarely on, I still thought that they would be 10-2 last year. They ended up only losing the one game, and you can, make a Great argument that not even they should have won that game if they do things a little bit differently, and had they made that change with how they ran the offense with the tempo for Jack Cohen, if they were doing that in that game, they probably win that game. So I guess my point is, there were, I think, even lower expectations going into last year. The schedule was not as tough last year as it looks like it's going to be this year. But I again, September 4th is going to tell us for sure, based on what I was just talking about, with a win or a close game at Ohio State, they're still going to be in that conversation. So I think at least going into Ohio State, they should be considered on that short list, because, to me, the odds were more against them last year. And with all the problems with the offensive line and inability to run the ball and all that stuff, they were still knocking on the door just outside that top 5 by the end of the year. So I'll again, the schedule's a little tougher this year, but I'll say, yeah, I'll say they should be a title contender going into this season. All right. Fill in the blank on this next one. And this is the question that came from the YouTube chat yesterday that we didn't get to. I kind of tweaked it a little bit. Fill in the blank. The first players, plural, coming off the bus when the Irish visit Ohio State should be blank.
The way I'm looking at this is players come off the bus. Usually you have an offensive bus and you have a defensive bus. Coming off the offensive bus, I think the charge should be led by Michael Mayer and presumably Buckner. I'm about 90% sure he's going to be the starter. Defensively, I think you need to go with Isaiah Foskey and potentially another, probably maybe like another linebacker, maybe Bertrand coming out. Just guys who are the Notre Dame standard. They've been at Notre Dame for a while. They're tough guys. They have tough mentality. They bring that edginess to them. I think those are the guys that I would be going with. And obviously, Buckner, yeah, he's a first-time starter, but you got to show that you're behind your guy. The quarterback is that one position where you whoever's named starter, they're automatically kind of one of those team leaders, not only offensively, but defensively. It's just the guy who's leading you into battle, the most important position on the field. So for me, it's got to be Buckner and Mayer offensively, and defensively, I would go Foskey and Bertrand.
See, I was looking at, like a little more gun show, I think it, and I don't know if that was necessarily, the specific intent, but like, did you see the picture of the tight ends the other day, and Michael Mayer and the guns that he's gone on him, you need him in like his Hulk Hogan, t-shirt with no sleeves and just jacked coming off the bus. I'm sure they'll have a suit on and stuff, so it's not going to matter as much. But yeah, I mean, I definitely think Michael Mayer needs to be there. Foskey needs to be there. JD Bertrand, he's got some guns of his own. He's pretty piped up. So, and I think, if you're going by, who's rocked up, Audric Estime is a guy that you're not going to be able to deny either. He doesn't have the veteran, the leadership and all that stuff that you're talking about. But I'd put those 4 guys up against, probably any quartet in the country in terms of who's going to run the gun show with those guys.
Who's going to provide the most intimidation?
That's right. That's exactly right. Okay, next question. Between Lincoln Riley at USC, Mario Cristobal at Miami, and Brian Kelly at LSU, which of those high-profile coaches is under the most pressure to win in his first year at his new school?
This one was tough for me. I think you can throw out Mario Cristobal. Miami is really set on, going from Oregon to Miami. I don't know what kind of move you would consider that. Is that a lateral? Is that an upward? Is that a downward? I don't know what you would consider that move. And I don't think Mario Cristobal has a lot of pressure because Miami has stunk, for a while now, and they're just looking for someone to kind of get their head above the water at least.
Right.
But for me, it comes down to Lincoln Riley and Brian Kelly, most importantly. And I'll tell you why, because Lincoln Riley left a situation at Oklahoma where he was kind of the catalyst behind the reason, I think, for why they were shifting to the SEC. I think that was a big thing that he probably got into some people's ears about. And just quite frankly, Lincoln Riley was set at Oklahoma. He had the recruiting pipeline he had the national recognition. He was getting into playoffs. He was getting into the big games. And then to go to USC, who's been struggling for the last few years, who has more of that kind of national past reputation when it comes to college football, I think that's a hard situation to be in because he willingly gave up a successful, role and position. And I admire him to take on, maybe a bigger challenge essentially. But you also have to look at Brian Kelly because Brian Kelly left Notre Dame and said that he wanted more, and he's being thrown into the heart of the SEC. You got
went
Alabama,
there to win a national championship,
right?
His own
You got
words.
Alabama, you got Texas A&M, you got Auburn, you got all these schools that are just big powerhouses, and to say you want that, you got to be able to win and back it up. And I think that's any sport at LSU, like when Paul Maneri left Notre Dame to go to LSU for baseball, he was expected to win right away. And if you don't win, they're going to be asking after even a year, is this the right move? Do we need to move on already? So for me, I think Brian Kelly's got the most pressure to win. He asked to be put into the heart of the SEC. What those fans and boosters are like down there. They expect you to win almost right away, especially with LSU winning a national championship, in the past 2 to 3 years. I think that all the pressure is on Brian Kelly and in this first season.
See, I'm and DT Roll Hunter or Troll Hunter. I don't know exactly, what that, how we say that. He agrees with you. I put some of his comments up a second ago. He says he personally thinks he's only going to win 6 games. Then he talked about USC having a baby soft schedule. And so all the things that you're talking about, I would rank them like this. I put Lincoln Riley at the top because of a lot of the things that you're talking about, what he left and, going to USC. They're already showing up, pretty high, in a lot of the, the way too early polls. No, we haven't seen the official polls yet, but he also, went out and raided Pittsburgh and brought in Jordan Addison, and he's brought in all these transfers. And the fact that they do have a soft schedule, their schedule is going to come down to 2 games this year, and Notre Dame is going to be one of them at the end of the season. But I would put it Lincoln Riley, Brian Kelly, and then Cristobal, because I think that with everything that Lincoln Riley has done, bringing in all these guys, bringing in his own quarterback, getting Addison, doing all this stuff, leaving what he left behind, and the fact that it's the USC fan base, I think I put that over Brian Kelly at LSU because Brian Kelly, he's brought in some transfers, but he's got a bigger rebuild in terms of, the roster than even Lincoln Riley has because of the level of competition that the two have to play. I think that there would be more pressure on Brian Kelly if he had as soft a schedule as what USC is going to have. There would be more pressure to win. And because Lincoln Riley does have that softer schedule and all that he has done, I think that there's greater expectation on him right away out there at USC. And again, because I think Brian Kelly gets a little bit of a grace period from LSU in year 1, but year 2, I think, is when it's really going to be on for him because they all think that he's this great recruiter and he can do all these things in recruiting. So I think there's more on Riley in year 1. I put him ahead of Brian Kelly. By year 2, it's really going to be on for Kelly down there in Baton Rouge, though. Okay, chicken or the egg football question for you, Jess. Does the quarterback make the receiver, or does the receiver make the quarterback?
Well, this is tough. This is a classic chicken or egg debate. You could sit here and think about it for a while, but unless your name is Tom Brady or Aaron Rodgers or, maybe like the top 5 quarterbacks or, I guess I shouldn't be inclusive to the NFL. I think no matter what level you're at, if you're a top 5, maybe as you go down to college, there's more teams. So top 10 quarterback, I think it's more so the wide receiver because unless you're a guy like Tom Brady who can, Peyton Manning, who can get up to the line of scrimmage, read what the defense is doing, audible to a favorable matchup where you might not have as great of a wide receiver, but you need to get him at a certain position, certain area on the field it doesn't really matter who the guy is, because if you're open, you're open. You're going to, the ball is going to be there. If you're going to catch it, you're going to catch it. But when you're not one of those top level quarterbacks and you got to have wide receivers who are maybe fighting for 50-50 balls or using their pure athleticism or ability to kind of get some catches and get by guys or get open, that's where I think that it becomes more of the, the wide receiver. So at the end of the day, we all can't be like Peyton Manning or Rodgers or Brady. So for me, I think I'm going to have to lean more so towards the wide receivers. I think a guy like Troy Aikman really benefited from some of the wide receivers that he had. Yes, was he a good quarterback? But I think those wide receivers really took him to the next level.
That's true.
To the level of winning a Super Bowl. I don't think Troy Aikman has the success that he has without some of those wide receivers that he had. So for me, I'm leaning towards wide receivers.
Interesting. Dalton Skinner says Burrow, Rodgers, Brady, Allen, Mahomes all make their wideouts reach their potential. And I guess again, it's almost like a chicken and egg within the chicken and the egg, because like when you're talking about these Hall of Fame caliber guys, and I don't know if I'm ready to put Burrow there just yet, but I mean for at least a year, he was great. But Jamar Chase is pretty good though too. But like you were talking about some of it, separation, 50-50 balls and all that, but Julian Edelman doesn't become Julian Edelman if he doesn't have Tom Brady,
Right.
And like you can look at those guys before him as well. And like one of the first things that I thought about when I saw this question, I don't remember where I saw it, but I saw it and kind of jotted it down and thought it would be fun to kick around here. Like think about Equanimeous St. Brown in his last year at Notre Dame, 2017. He led the Irish in receiving that year, 33 catches for 515 yards when he had a quarterback who was sub 50%, Brandon Wimbush, as a passer. But those were about half the numbers that he had the year before when he had Deshaun Kaiser as the quarterback. And, so it's like for me, I lean the other way because of a lot of the things that you're saying. I just feel like, the good quarterbacks don't have to, like we saw this all the time with Ian Book, where like he had to wait to see the receiver come open. And that's not how you play winning quarterback at the highest level.
The area that's going to be open.
You have to throw, you have to trust, you have to throw to a spot and trust that your receiver is going to get there. So maybe that makes the argument for more for the receiver. I don't know, but like the ability of the quarterback to basically trust himself and do that. And I can't remember what show I was watching something on, like one of these NFL quarterbacks a few years back, and like he was saying the same thing, like the fact that one of his coaches just sat and told him, it's like, look, you've just got to throw that up there. Sometimes you've got to know what the route that your receiver is running is, and throw it up there and let him make a play on the ball. So is that the receiver? Is that the quarterback? To me, I lean a little bit more toward the quarterback, because the ball has to be there, and it has to be there on time. Sometimes like for some of these elite receivers, like we're talking about, they have an even greater ability to, to go up and make those plays on the ball, like a Dez Bryant, or, like look at the Green Bay Packers with Aaron Rodgers and even Brett Favre before that. Most of those receivers, Devontae Adams included, like most of these guys that he's had over the years have started out as relatively unknown guys who have turned into, all pro great receivers because of the fact that they've had Aaron Rodgers throwing them the ball. So I lean more toward the quarterback than the receiver. So I guess we're going to just have to disagree on that one.
That's fine. That's fine. Like I said, it's such a hard question, but if I had to pick,
I mean, it's tough because it's like yin and the yang. It's, they do go together, that's like, would Jerry Rice have been Jerry Rice without Joe Montana? Like by the time he got Steve Young, he was already going to be in the Hall of Fame, but it's so I lean more toward the quarterback.
It's fun to watch it go both ways, though. Sometimes the wide receivers pick up the quarterback and make these outstanding plays, and then sometimes the quarterback puts it in a spot, and it's like literally the spot where it's put is probably the only spot it could have been caught. So it's it's fun to see both of those.
Yeah. Charles Barkley is staying with TNT. I don't know how happy you are about this. You watch more NBA.
I'm very happy.
Than me.
He makes that show.
That's right. Staying with TNT after a flirtation to move to the Live Golf Tour. He makes around $10 million a year just from TNT. That's not including his endorsements and stuff like that. So my question to you is, who deserves to be the highest paid TV analyst in sports?
For me, you got to look at what's the big market, what's the sport dominated in the United States, and that's football. So I'm looking at football, and it's got to be my man, Tony Romo. I know he was a Cowboy, so everyone's going to be like, oh, he's biased. But Tony Romo, take out maybe his first, second year on the job. Maybe he was a little kind of too hyper fixated on, trying to predict plays and all that stuff. But I think, and it goes into the point of why I like him so much, is I genuinely think that just comes from his enthusiasm. Like, he just gets like word vomit sometimes because he's so excited to just be talking about football and watching some of, the best in the business do it. And then at the same time, Tony Romo breaks things down in a way that the common maybe viewer wouldn't understand, but he puts it in a way that is very understandable. He helps you kind of expand your football knowledge. He's having a lot of fun. There's a lot of, a lot of enthusiasm at the same time. So for me, it's got to be Tony Romo for those reasons. He's constantly enthusiastic about what he does, and he's constantly, allowing the viewer or the listener to become a better rounded kind of football knowledge based at the end of the day.
Yeah. Seeing some comments for people nominating play-by-play guys like Gus Johnson and Mike Tirico. We're not talking about the play-by-play guys. We can talk about those guys at another point. We're talking about just the analysts. In other words, the former player, analyzing, whether it's the play or the studio or any of that kind of stuff. And I agree with everything you say about Romo. I mean, he was the highest paid analyst for a time, and then Troy Aikman said, I deserve to be paid more, and he got his, he got
the
his
battle
money.
Of Dallas quarterbacks.
That's right. And then here comes Tom Brady, and he's getting even more, even though it sounds like he's going to have to do more than just be an analyst to make, his money. Excuse me. So for football, there's no doubt it's Tony Romo. To me, I actually think that it probably should be Barkley. Now, I think you started off by saying football, and specifically the NFL, is the biggest, most popular sport. So based on that, it should probably be a football analyst. But the NBA gets nowhere near the viewership that the NFL gets, yet everyone is always talking about Inside the NBA on TNT. And the reason they talk about it is because of Charles Barkley. You could almost, you could put Barkley, it's the reason that Live Golf wanted him. You could put Barkley in probably any studio show, whether it's, football, basketball. He crosses over and talks about college. No, he doesn't. He obviously doesn't know all the college players all the time. But you could put him in golf. You could put him in baseball. So basically, I guess what I'm saying is, you don't talk about Inside the NBA on TNT without talking about Charles Barkley, and he is. So I think that he has to be up there. That's who I would go with. I think is Charles, because I'll flip over if I know that show is on. Just to hear what they're talking about, because you always know there's going to be something good that comes up when he's on there.
I think Charles Barkley's greatest attributes as a TV analyst is he always keeps it real. No matter how blunt it is or how, you don't want to hear it, he will always tell you straight from the hip exactly how it is. There's no, sugarcoating it. And then just the way he goes about it, the comedic relief, the ways that he can provide such kind of like comedy and lightheartedness to kind of, when we're talking competitive sports, the seriousness that kind of goes around it. So I do like the versatility of Charles Barkley. I do think wherever you place him, no matter what sport it would be, he'd always shoot it straight to you. He'd always find a way to provide some comedic relief. So yeah, I really do like Charles Barkley as well. The one thing I don't like is the comment here from Jonathan Gabrick. I am not a Boog Sciambi guy. I have told you this on
and he's
multiple
also a play-by-play
occasions.
guy. So yeah,
I wish that Boog Sciambi never got this contract with Marquee Sports due to the Cubs, because he is probably my least favorite person to listen to. I think he is boring. I think that he is, it's just, I don't know. He just always seems to be talking to talk. I don't think he necessarily, he fills air rather than kind of just letting moments kind of ride out at times.
yeah.
But
Let it
that's my
breathe a little bit
personal
more.
opinion. I'm a huge Cubs fan, but for me, I love when Boog Sciambi is off on Sundays with ESPN and I get to listen to the alternate crew.
Yeah, I think he'd be, better suited with maybe more personality in terms of his analyst. Anyway, it's that booth has been, a little dull the last
Yeah,
several
it doesn't
years,
help. The pairing
Yeah.
of those two isn't the best situation for Boog Sciambi. So, you've been trying to give him a break. I guess I can relax a little bit.
All right. Before we wrap up, David Jones said, great observation about Estime running laterally, but was that Audric choosing to go laterally or not having a choice because the offensive line was, I assume he means not getting any movement, and that's a very fair point as well. And that probably did play into it. And, that's something that again, I'll be watching when training camp starts, exactly what that offensive line looks like. I do think it's going to be a lot better. And Estime is a guy who was on my list of players to watch yesterday. So I'll be watching him and seeing exactly what that looks like. And if it's, how different those holes are and maybe how that affects his running as well. So,
yeah, I think,
big
point to hit on is I think Notre Dame's success offensively, they have to be able to run the ball. So if they can establish a good run game and then establish, some passing off of that, they'll be in great shape. But I really do think that they have to establish that run game with whoever, whatever duo is going to be back there this season.
I think they'll be able to. All right, as we finish up, a reminder, hit that like button on YouTube, subscribe, rate, comment, all that different kind of stuff on the audio podcast platforms. We appreciate you listening. Jesse, great stuff from you tonight. Have a great rest of your week, and I'll see you again soon.
Yeah, I'll see you soon. Thanks for having me. It was a great day of topics.
I think so too. We turned right through. Thanks for listening. We will talk to you tomorrow. IB Nation Sports Talk.